The ancient world is filled with stories that have been passed down for generations. But what if the legends we know were only a sliver of the truth, wrapped in layers of time and mystery? What if the myths of ancient Greece, those tales of gods and monsters, hold secrets that reach far beyond the borders of myth, touching the very foundations of our understanding of history? The gods of ancient Greece are as familiar to us as our own reflection. Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, and Athena, figures that have shaped the cultural imagination for centuries. These gods are often seen as mythological symbols, their stories packaged as timeless allegories. But when you look closer, you begin to notice something odd. What if these gods weren't merely symbolic creations of the Greek imagination? What if they were once real figures, rooted in a forgotten past, whose stories were twisted by time and retold through myth? The origins of Greek mythology are shrouded in a haze of uncertainty. But one thing is certain: the stories of the Olympian gods didn't come from nowhere. The Greeks themselves believed their gods were born from an ancient and chaotic world, where titans, colossal beings of unimaginable power, once ruled over the earth. These titans were said to have shaped the very fabric of the world before they were overthrown by the Olympian gods. But where did the idea of these mighty beings come from? Could there be a deeper, darker history hidden behind the rise and fall of these legendary figures? As the titans fell and the Olympians ascended, the myths of ancient Greece began to take shape. The stories of gods clashing, of divine politics and familial betrayal, became the foundation for a culture that revered its gods and shaped its identity around them. But as these stories were passed down, they began to blur the lines between fact and fiction. The myths, once rooted in ancient truths, became distorted through the lens of time, leading us to question how much of what we think we know about ancient Greece is based on true history. The rise of the Olympians wasn't just a tale of power struggles among deities. It was a reflection of the shifting tides of human civilization. The ancient Greeks were not isolated in their beliefs. Their gods mirrored the gods of other ancient cultures, from the Egyptian pantheon to the Sumerian deities. These cross-cultural similarities suggest that perhaps the myths of the Olympians weren't born from nothing. What if these gods were part of a larger, more ancient tradition, one that transcended the Greek world and reached into forgotten civilizations long before the Greeks ever set foot on the stage of history? But perhaps the most intriguing part of this story lies in the shadows, where the whispers of ancient civilizations remain just out of reach. The Minoans and Mycenaeans, two cultures that preceded the classical Greek era, left behind remnants of their own stories, each one hinting at a deeper connection to the myths that would later define Greece. The Minoans, with their intricate art and advanced technologies, were said to have vanished mysteriously, leaving behind ruins that seem to have no place in the history books. And the Mycenaeans, who came after, are credited with laying the groundwork for much of what would become Greek culture. But their sudden collapse has never been fully explained. Could these civilizations have influenced the stories of the gods, or were their myths swallowed by time, lost to the ages? In every corner of Greek mythology, there are echoes of a world much older, a time when gods walked the earth, and the lines between history and legend were far less defined. The myths we know, shaped by centuries of retelling, may not be what we think. Beneath the familiar tales of divine intervention and heroic quests, there may lie an ancient truth, one that challenges everything we believe about the origins of Greece. What if the history of ancient Greece is much more complex, much older, and far more mysterious than we've ever been told? What if the gods we know were not just myths, but memories of real, forgotten beings whose influence reached far beyond the Greek world? The answers may be buried in the layers of myth, waiting to be uncovered. The deeper you look into the origins of Greece, the more you realize that the story is not as simple as we've been led to believe. This is just the beginning. And as the curtain lifts on the gods of Greece, we move from the realm of myth to the heart of the divine figures themselves, where the truth behind their power, their lives, and their mysteries may be far darker and more complex than we ever imagined. The gods of ancient Greece stand at the pinnacle of myth and legend, their names echoing through time as symbols of power, wisdom, and vengeance. But how much of what we know about them is truth, and how much is the fabric of imagination? Were these divine figures mere creations of myth, or could they have been based on real beings, rulers from an ancient past, whose stories became distorted over time? Or could they be something even more extraordinary, beings not of this earth, whose presence was too complex, too alien for the minds of early civilizations to fully comprehend. The legends of Zeus, Athena, and Poseidon are some of the most enduring in history. We know them as gods, ruling from their majestic homes on Mount Olympus, each with distinct powers and roles. But what if they weren't simply products of divine creativity? What if they were based on actual kings or rulers from an ancient civilization? Figures whose influence was so vast that their stories evolved into the myths we know today. The idea is not as far-fetched as it might seem. Consider the possibility that Zeus, the king of the gods, was not a god at all, but a powerful king or warrior who was revered to such an extent that his real-life feats became imbued with divine qualities. Ancient texts and carvings often speak of great leaders, sometimes with attributes that seem to transcend the human realm. Could Zeus have been an ancient ruler whose deeds were so extraordinary that over generations they morphed into the mighty, thunderous god we think of today? The same could be said for Poseidon, the god of the sea. What if Poseidon's domain wasn't just a realm of mythology, but an actual empire, one that controlled vast naval fleets, leaving a legacy of dominance over the seas? Then there's Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, often depicted as a protector of the city. Her wisdom and strategy were said to be unparalleled. But what if the stories of Athena were based on a woman of unparalleled intellect and military prowess, whose leadership inspired not just admiration, but reverence, and eventually divinity? Perhaps Athena was a leader whose true identity faded into obscurity, her story wrapped in the mystery of time, her name lost but her legend enduring. The evidence that points to these gods being based on real individuals or figures from an ancient past is tantalizing. In ancient carvings, texts, and even oral histories, we find symbols and depictions that hint at something more than myth. For example, ancient Greek texts often refer to gods in ways that seem to hint at more human characteristics, actions of kings and rulers, feats of leadership and power that could have been attributed to real men and women. And then there are the ancient carvings and statues depicting gods with regal crowns or seated in thrones, much like kings. These images suggest that what we now view as divine might have been inspired by something much more tangible, powerful rulers whose influence stretched across the land. But the story doesn't end there. There's another possibility, one that's far more radical, but no less captivating. Could these gods, these powerful figures, have actually been extraterrestrial beings? Ancient cultures, including the Greeks, had a remarkable understanding of the stars and the heavens. They told stories of gods descending from the skies, of divine beings who were not from this world, but who walked among men. Some even suggest that these gods might have been advanced beings from other planets or distant stars, whose technology was so far beyond the understanding of ancient people that it was seen as magic or divinity. Was the true nature of these gods hidden in plain sight, misunderstood by those who could only see them as myths? Could ancient civilizations have had encounters with beings from the stars? Their memories of these encounters shaped into divine mythologies, passed down through generations. What if the gods of Mount Olympus were not gods at all, but ancient rulers, explorers, or even extraterrestrial beings, whose true identities were concealed by time and tradition? The lines between myth and reality blur, as we consider the possibility that these gods were part of a much older, much stranger history than we've ever been taught. The connections between the gods of Greece and those of other ancient cultures, such as the Egyptians and the Sumerians, further complicate the story. In each of these ancient civilizations, gods descended from the sky, ruling over humanity with incredible powers. The Egyptians spoke of their gods as divine beings from the stars, beings who bestowed upon them the knowledge of the pyramids and advanced mathematics. The Sumerians, too, had gods who came from the heavens, the Anunnaki, beings of incredible intelligence, who imparted the knowledge of civilization to the people of Mesopotamia. These shared stories, these overlapping traditions, suggest a hidden truth, one that spans across ancient cultures, hinting at a forgotten history where gods and humans weren't so easily separated. Could the gods of ancient Greece, like those of Egypt and Sumer, have been part of a greater shared history? Were they a collective memory of encounters with advanced beings from another time or place? The evidence is scattered across time, hidden in the ancient texts, carvings, and stories of civilizations long gone. And as we begin to connect the dots between these gods, these powerful figures of legend, a picture emerges that is far more complex and far more fascinating than we've ever imagined. this mystery is far from solved. The gods of Greece, once seen as mere myth, may be something far more extraordinary than we have ever realized. Their origins, their true nature, remain buried beneath layers of time and culture, waiting to be uncovered. But perhaps, the more we try to understand, the more elusive the truth becomes. Could it be that the gods of ancient Greece were never truly forgotten? Or is it that their story has been hidden for a reason we are only just beginning to understand? As we leave the world of gods and return to the humans who shaped the stories, the mysteries of the divine continue to linger, calling us to look deeper into the past. What if, in understanding the gods, we might just unlock the answers to questions we never thought to ask? Beneath the grand temples and the powerful stories of gods and heroes, the heart of ancient Greece beats with a quieter, more profound mystery: the teachings of its philosophers. These ancient thinkers, often regarded as the fathers of Western philosophy, left behind ideas that have shaped much of our modern worldview. But what if the philosophies we know today are only fragments of a much deeper, more esoteric knowledge that was never meant to be revealed? What if some of the greatest minds of ancient Greece knew secrets about the universe, about existence itself, that have been hidden for millennia? Pythagoras, the revered mathematician and philosopher, is best known for his contributions to mathematics, particularly the famous Pythagorean theorem. But what if there was more to Pythagoras than just numbers and triangles? Many believe that Pythagoras had access to a far deeper, sacred understanding of the universe, one that combined mathematics, music, and philosophy into a unified theory of existence. According to ancient texts, Pythagoras didn't just study numbers, he saw them as the building blocks of the cosmos itself. He believed that the entire universe was governed by mathematical principles, and that everything in existence could be understood through the harmony of numbers. Some even suggest that Pythagoras had knowledge of sacred geometry, an ancient system of geometric shapes and patterns that reveal the hidden order of the universe. But was this knowledge passed down to us in its pure form, or was it deliberately obscured? Pythagoras' teachings were shrouded in mystery, and much of his work was kept secret, reserved only for a select group of initiates. Could it be that the secrets he uncovered about the nature of reality, the interconnection of all things, and the hidden geometry of the cosmos were intentionally suppressed by later scholars or power structures that feared its potential to change the very fabric of society? Then there's Heraclitus, the philosopher known for his doctrine of change. Heraclitus famously said, "You cannot step into the same river twice," pointing to the constant flux of the world around us. But his teachings went far beyond the idea of impermanence. He believed that the universe was governed by a deeper hidden unity, a logos that connected all things. His notion of eternal change, balanced by an underlying order, suggested a profound understanding of the nature of the cosmos that was centuries ahead of its time. And yet, much of Heraclitus's work has been lost or corrupted over time, with only fragments of his writings surviving. What if these fragments were once part of a much grander philosophy, one that held the key to understanding the very fabric of the universe? The pre-Socratics, a group of philosophers who came before Socrates, were also profoundly ahead of their time. Their ideas on the nature of reality, the soul, and the cosmos point to an understanding of the universe that transcended mere observation. They sought to answer questions about the essence of existence, using reason and logic to explore the mysteries of the world. Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes, for example, proposed radical ideas about the nature of the universe, ideas that are only now being revisited in modern science. They believed that water was the fundamental substance of the universe. Anaximander proposed the concept of an infinite, boundless, apeiron, as the origin of all things, and Anaximenes thought air was the primary substance that underlies reality. These philosophers were not just speculating about the world around them. They were laying the groundwork for a kind of cosmic theory that could explain everything from the nature of the soul to the creation of the cosmos itself. But much of their work was lost, forgotten, or dismissed by later philosophers. Was this knowledge deliberately erased? Were these early thinkers too radical, too ahead of their time, for the authorities of the day to tolerate? Could there have been teachings that were intentionally concealed, teachings that posed a threat to the established order of thought and power? Some historians and scholars believe that this hidden wisdom was suppressed not out of ignorance, but out of fear of the power such knowledge could unleash. The ideas of sacred geometry, the true nature of the soul, and the mysteries of consciousness are concepts that challenge the very foundations of what we believe about the world. What if these ancient philosophers understood something about the nature of existence that was too dangerous to reveal to the masses? What if their teachings contained secrets about the human soul, the nature of consciousness, or the ultimate purpose of life itself, secrets that have been lost to time, deliberately buried beneath the sands of history? The mysteries of Greek philosophy are far deeper than most of us realize. We think of them as the creators of rational thought, the founders of West, the Minoans, a name that stirs images of ancient palaces, intricate frescoes, and the mysterious labyrinth of King Minos. Yet, for all their splendor and sophistication, the Minoan civilization remains one of history's greatest enigmas. While their existence is well documented, much about them continues to elude us, buried beneath the sands of time, their true nature obscured by the veil of history. They were the people who preceded the classical Greeks, yet their influence remains far more profound than we have been led to believe. The Minoans were not just the pre-Greeks, as they are often called, a culture existing merely in the shadows of Greece's rise. No, they were something more, something far more advanced, perhaps, than the world ever truly recognized. They inhabited the island of Crete, their civilization flourishing around 2000 BCE, long before the great city-states of Athens and Sparta. They built sprawling palaces, most famously the Palace of Knossos, whose labyrinthine corridors and stunning artwork depict a society of surprising complexity. They were not merely traders and craftsmen, but navigators of the seas, creating a network of influence that stretched across the Mediterranean. The Minoans were pioneers, not just in art and architecture, but in science and knowledge. Their frescoes depict vibrant scenes of nature, ceremonies, and athletic competitions, revealing a deep connection to the world around them. They were also experts in navigation, their seafaring prowess surpassing that of their contemporaries. But perhaps most intriguingly, the Minoans had an advanced understanding of the cosmos. Evidence suggests they were deeply attuned to the movements of the stars and planets, perhaps even tracking celestial events with precision. Their complex calendar systems, capable of predicting solar and lunar eclipses, show a level of astronomical knowledge that seems centuries ahead of its time. But what happened to them? What caused their sudden decline, leaving behind only fragmented remnants of their once great civilization? Theories abound. Some suggest that a catastrophic volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, sent a massive shockwave that ravaged the Minoan fleet and weakened their civilization. Others believe it was invasion or internal strife that led to their downfall. But what if the truth was even more elusive than a natural disaster or human conflict? Could the Minoans have been deliberately erased from history, their advanced culture and knowledge suppressed in favor of the rise of the Greek city-states? One of the most intriguing aspects of the Minoans is how their culture was abruptly eclipsed by the Mycenaeans, a more warlike people who followed them. The Minoans, known for their peaceful nature and artistic expression, seemed to vanish, making way for the Mycenaeans, who left a much more tangible legacy. The Mycenaeans themselves were the ones who would go on to influence the Greeks, particularly through their epic tales of heroes like Achilles and Odysseus, stories that would eventually be immortalized in Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. But as the Mycenaeans rose, the Minoans, despite their profound contributions, faded into obscurity. Did the Mycenaeans simply outlast them, or was there more to this transition than meets the eye? Evidence of this transition suggests that the Minoans were not simply replaced by the Mycenaeans. Instead, it appears as though the Minoans were either destroyed in a cataclysmic event or deliberately erased from history. The palaces of Crete, once centers of culture and innovation, were abandoned. The Minoan cities were left to crumble, and the Mycenaeans, with their militaristic society, moved in carrying with them the stories and traditions of their predecessors, but reinterpreted through their own lens. It's almost as if the legacy of the Minoans was too great, too powerful to be allowed to continue in its original form. Consider the possibility that the Minoans, with their advanced understanding of navigation, astronomy, and perhaps even the mysteries of the human soul, were too far ahead of their time. What if their secrets were seen as a threat to the emerging powers of the Greek city-states, or worse, to forces beyond the earth itself? What if their knowledge was so profound that it was feared, and their civilization intentionally erased to make room for the rise of a new order. Could the Minoans have been the true architects of many of Greece's greatest myths and technologies, from the very tales of gods descending from the heavens to the advanced arts of construction, which would later inspire the Greeks? Their influence may still echo today in ways we have yet to fully comprehend. The Minoans were not just an early civilization. They were a society that may have held keys to forgotten knowledge, hidden from the world, their contributions obscured by time and circumstance. As we move on from the Minoans, we must consider what came next. The Mycenaeans, though more warlike, left behind tangible traces of their culture, their ruins still standing as proof of their impact. But the Minoans, whose mysteries run deeper, whose knowledge may have transcended their time, continue to haunt the edges of history. Perhaps their secrets, lost for millennia, will one day be uncovered, offering us a glimpse into a past far more ancient and mysterious than we have ever known. And as we turn our gaze to the Mycenaeans, we will see how their culture, shaped by the echoes of the Minoans, would pave the way for the Greeks, who would ultimately change the world. The Mycenaeans, the warriors of legend, immortalized in Homer's epic tales of the Hedi Iliad and the Sudi Odyssey. Their fortified cities, their grand palaces, and their aggressive nature shaped the very foundation of ancient Greek civilization. Yet, despite their undeniable contributions to the rise of Greece, the fall of the Mycenaean civilization remains one of history's greatest mysteries. How did such a powerful and sophisticated society, with its wealth and military might, crumble so suddenly and so completely? The Mycenaeans were not just warriors, they were a people with an intricate culture, their art and architecture revealing a highly developed civilization. Their palaces massive, imposing structures like the one at Mycenae itself, were not just homes, but centers of power, storing treasures, knowledge, and perhaps even secrets that we can only begin to understand. The walls of these palaces were adorned with frescoes, depicting battles, rituals, and life in a kingdom that seemed both advanced and ferocious. The Mycenaeans were known for their military dominance, their conquests stretching across the Aegean and into parts of Anatolia, Egypt, and beyond. But despite their strength and reach, something inexplicable happened to them. The Mycenaean civilization, once so dominant, suddenly and mysteriously collapsed. No single cause has been agreed upon by scholars. Some suggest internal strife, perhaps a breakdown in their complex political systems, as the elite fought for control over their dwindling resources. Others speculate that foreign invaders, possibly the mysterious sea peoples who appear in the annals of Egyptian records, brought an end to their rule. But what if there is more to the story? What if the fall of the Mycenaeans was not caused by human conflict or invasion, but by a far more catastrophic event? One that struck from the heavens or from deep within the earth itself. One theory points to the possibility of a cosmic event, an astronomical disaster like a comet or asteroid impact, that could have caused widespread environmental devastation, disrupting agriculture, trade, and society as a whole. The Mycenaean world was tightly connected to the Mediterranean basin, dependent on trade and agricultural stability. A cosmic event could have decimated crops, caused violent weather shifts, and wiped out vital trade routes, all of which would have crippled a society that relied on its ability to project power and maintain wealth. The mysterious disappearance of many Mycenaean cities and the sudden halt in the construction of monumental structures lend some weight to this theory. Could the Mycenaeans, despite their might, have been helpless against an event they had no understanding of or means to prevent? But the idea of a cosmic catastrophe is just one part of the story. There are also connections to other ancient civilizations, like the Egyptians and the Hittites, that suggest a more complex web of influence and potential conflict. The Mycenaeans were not an isolated civilization, but part of a larger Mediterranean network. Their trade relationships with the Egyptians and the Hittites were well documented. These civilizations, with their own advanced technologies and knowledge, could have been involved in the chain of events that led to the Mycenaean collapse. In fact, some historians suggest that the fall of the Mycenaeans was part of a greater, more global pattern of civilizations disappearing under mysterious circumstances. The Egyptians, too, faced their own dark periods, and the Hittites vanished from history with little explanation. Was the collapse of the Mycenaeans a piece of a much larger puzzle, one that connects civilizations spread across time and space? The sudden decline of the Mycenaean civilization has led some to speculate that this wasn't just a societal collapse. It could have been a deliberate erasure, the destruction of a powerful civilization that threatened to disrupt a larger, unseen order. Was it really an invasion or natural disaster, or was there something more covert at play? Could the Mycenaeans have been victims of forces beyond their comprehension, forces that saw their influence as a threat to the stability of the ancient world? As the Mycenaeans fell into ruin, their cities abandoned, their palaces left to decay, the remnants of their civilization became fodder for the myths and legends that would later define Greek culture. Homer's stories of heroic warriors, of Troy and Odysseus, are not just tales of imagination. They are echoes of a once mighty civilization whose fall left behind unanswered questions. The myths may have been their way of processing the catastrophic events that shaped their downfall. The collapse of the Mycenaeans marks a critical juncture in history. The end of their world is followed by the rise of what is known as the Greek Dark Age, a period of profound uncertainty where knowledge was lost and new mysterious cultures began to emerge from the ashes of the old. What truly brought about the fall of the Mycenaeans? Was it a cosmic disaster, foreign invaders, or a combination of factors that led to their disappearance from history? As we move from the mystery of the Mycenaeans into the so-called Dark Age of Greece, we are left with more questions than answers, and the faint hope that somewhere, beneath the ruins, the answers may still be waiting to be uncovered. The Greek Dark Age is one of the most elusive and enigmatic periods in ancient history. After the sudden collapse of the Mycenaean civilization, Greece fell into what seems like a deep, almost deliberate forgetfulness. The grand cities, the palaces, the writing systems, all vanished as though erased from memory. Yet, in the shadow of this mysterious gap, something else began to emerge. A new, more mythic world was born, its stories woven from the fabric of events that seemed both familiar and strange, as if they were trying to remember something lost long ago. But what really happened to Greece during this dark time? Was it simply a period of decline, or was there something more deliberate at play? A systematic erasure of the past, making room for something new. The timeline is stark. Around 1100 BCE, the Mycenaean world crumbled, leaving behind their grand citadels, their vast network of trade, and their written records. What followed was not just the collapse of a civilization, but an almost total disappearance of everything that had once defined it. The Greek Dark Age, lasting roughly from 1100 BCE to around 800 BCE, saw the abandonment of cities, the loss of writing, and a drastic decline in art and culture. The once flourishing palaces and trade routes were now desolate. The Mycenaean Linear B script, which had been used for record, keeping and communication, vanished, along with the art and architecture that had signified a proud civilization. It seemed as though the very knowledge of the Greeks' past had been lost, wiped clean from history. But was it truly a time of forgetting? Was this collapse merely the natural result of war, economic strife, and invasions, or was something more insidious at play? Perhaps an intentional obliteration of the old world, a way of cleansing the slate and creating a new order. The questions surrounding this period suggest that the answers may be more complex than we realize. What if the Dark Age wasn't simply a forgotten time, but an erased one, where ancient knowledge was deliberately concealed, hidden from the light of day? The Greek Dark Age, despite its apparent loss of culture, did not leave behind a vacuum. Instead, it was during this period that some of the greatest and most enduring Greek myths began to take shape. The tales of the Trojan War, the Odyssey, and the heroic deeds of figures like Heracles, Odysseus, and Achilles, stories that we now associate with the very foundation of Greek civilization, were all born in this time of obscurity. These myths, passed down through oral tradition, seem to carry with them fragments of a lost history, coded memories of real events that were transformed into legend over time. Could the Trojan War, for example, have been a memory of an actual conflict, one that was distorted and reinterpreted through the lens of myth? Could the heroics of Achilles and Hector have been reflections of real battles and figures whose true stories were buried in the fog of time? The idea that these myths are more than mere fiction is supported by the fact that many of the places and events described in them, such as Troy, have been found to have a basis in reality. Archaeological discoveries have confirmed that Troy was a real city, and evidence of a violent destruction around the time the epic is believed to have taken place raises the question: could this legend be the echo of a real war, one whose memory was twisted into the grandeur of myth. As the Mycenaean civilization faded into memory, new groups began to emerge in the Greek world. The Greeks who followed were not yet the classical civilization we think of today, but they were the ones who would eventually reawaken the lost knowledge of their ancestors. The myths they told were not just stories of gods and heroes, they were also the seeds of what would become the foundations of Greek culture, their understanding of heroism, fate, and the divine. But what happened to the knowledge, to the art, to the records of the Mycenaeans? The absence of writing during the Dark Age is puzzling. Was the writing system lost to time, or was it suppressed, its use abandoned for reasons unknown? Some historians believe that the ability to write was deliberately withheld from the masses as a way to control knowledge, maintaining power in the hands of a select few. The loss of the written word, then, might not have been a simple consequence of decline. It may have been an intentional move to prevent knowledge from being passed down. The gaps in history during this time suggest that there were forces at play that are not immediately apparent, forces that may have wanted to ensure that certain knowledge was kept hidden, concealed beneath layers of time, whether due to invasions, societal upheaval, or a more deliberate attempt to erase the past. The Greek Dark Age remains one of the most mysterious periods in the history of civilization. What happened to Greece in those centuries of silence? Was the Dark Age truly a time of forgetting? Or was it a time when the past was buried, waiting for a future civilization to rediscover it? This period of destruction and obscurity paved the way for the birth of classical Greece, where the myths and knowledge of the past were revisited, reinterpreted, and transformed into the foundation of a new civilization. As we leave the Greek Dark Age behind, we turn our attention to the reemergence of Greek culture, where the threads of the old world would be woven back into the fabric of the new, bringing with it both the wisdom and the mysteries of a forgotten age. The myths, once whispered in the shadows, would soon come to define a culture that changed the course of history forever. The rise of the Greek city-states is one of the most striking transformations in ancient history. From the ashes of the Mycenaean civilization and the long silence of the Dark Age, small Greek communities began to flourish once again by the 8th century BCE. How did this happen? How did these communities, once reduced to near obscurity, suddenly emerge as some of the most advanced and influential societies in the world? The answer is shrouded in mystery. But what is clear is that the city-states of Greece, Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and others were about to become the very heartbeat of a civilization that would change the world forever. These city-states didn't just emerge from the void. They rose from the ruins of a civilization that had once seemed invincible, one that had left behind a legacy of art, architecture, and military dominance. And yet, after the fall of the Mycenaeans and the collapse of their grand cities, a dramatic transformation took place. For centuries, Greece was plunged into a dark and silent period, where much of the knowledge and culture of the Mycenaeans was lost. Writing disappeared, cities crumbled, and the once mighty civilizations of the Aegean world faded into obscurity. And yet, from this seeming collapse, something extraordinary began to happen. By the 8th century BCE, the small Greek communities began to pull themselves out of the rubble. It was as though a spark had been lit, a sudden burst of energy that would set the stage for the rise of a new world. The first signs of this rebirth were small, scattered communities, but soon these fledgling city-states began to take shape. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, and other cities began to emerge, each developing their own distinct identity, culture, and way of life. The rise of these city-states was not simply a return to what had been before. It was a sudden dramatic leap forward. Art, philosophy, politics, and warfare, all of these aspects of civilization seemed to advance at an astonishing rate. The Greeks began to build cities that were not just functional but beautiful. The arts flourished once again, with advances in sculpture, pottery, and architecture. The Greeks developed their own unique style of art, one that celebrated the human form and the achievements of the individual. At the same time, Greek philosophy began to take root, with thinkers like Heraclitus, Pythagoras, and the early pre-Socratics seeking to understand the world around them. And in the realm of politics, the Greeks established new forms of government, laying the groundwork for democracy in Athens and militaristic oligarchy in Sparta. But perhaps the most puzzling question of all is how this sudden surge in intellectual and cultural achievement occurred. After the fall of the Mycenaeans, Greece was left with little more than the ruins of a once great civilization. Yet within a few centuries, the Greeks seem to have regained, or perhaps even surpassed, the knowledge and sophistication of their predecessors. Was this a result of a rediscovery of lost knowledge? Did these early city-states recover some of the ancient wisdom that had been lost during the Dark Age? Or was it something else entirely? Could it be that these new Greek societies were tapping into something that had been forgotten for centuries, a knowledge that had been suppressed or erased, but which was now re-emerging in new forms? Some scholars argue that the Greeks were not merely recovering lost knowledge, but that they were building on something far older, something that had been passed down from earlier, perhaps even more ancient civilizations. The Minoans and Mycenaeans, with their advanced knowledge of art, astronomy, and mathematics, might have left behind a foundation that was rediscovered by these new Greek communities. But the suddenness of this cultural leap raises questions. Was the rebirth of Greek civilization the result of something more than just a return to old ideas? Was there a hidden force, an unseen hand, guiding the development of these city-states? Were the gods of Olympus, so central to Greek culture, really more than myths? Perhaps they were the echoes of ancient rulers or mysterious beings, their wisdom passed down through generations, waiting for the right moment to resurface. What's even more remarkable is the speed at which these city-states began to take shape. Within just a few centuries, the Greeks had gone from a collection of isolated, struggling communities to a vibrant, sophisticated culture that would dominate the Mediterranean. Their political systems, their artistic achievements, and their intellectual contributions would lay the foundations for much of Western civilization. The city-states of Greece became a model for the world, each one a microcosm of what the whole civilization could achieve when it was united by a common vision. This rapid development raises a tantalizing possibility that the Greeks, emerging from the chaos of the Dark Age, were not just recovering their past, but were rediscovering something far more profound, an ancient wisdom that had been lost, suppressed, or forgotten. Whether through trade, exploration, or divine inspiration, these city-states were tapping into a deep well of knowledge that had been waiting to be found. The rise of the Greek city-state set the stage for the next great chapter in Greek history, the emergence of the first great philosophers, whose teachings would shape not only Greece but the entire Western world. As the city-states began to develop their identities and cultures, the search for knowledge, truth, and understanding was about to reach new heights. The mysteries of the past would soon collide with the philosophers' quest for answers to the fundamental questions of life, existence, and the cosmos. And so, from the ruins of the Mycenaeans, the Greeks began to build something far more powerful, a civilization whose intellectual and cultural achievements would resonate for centuries to come. The birth of Greek philosophy is often depicted as the flowering of pure intellectual curiosity, a quest for knowledge that arose spontaneously from the minds of the first great thinkers. Yet, what if this sudden surge in philosophical thought was not born in isolation, but rather emerged from a deeper well of hidden wisdom, passed down through ancient civilizations whose knowledge had been buried or lost to time? What if the early philosophers of Greece were not merely inventing new ideas, but rediscovering long-forgotten truths, the echoes of which had been hidden by history? The pre-Socratic philosophers, the first to formally explore the nature of existence, the cosmos, and the divine, were pioneers in intellectual exploration. Pythagoras, Heraclitus, and others laid the groundwork for the great philosophical tradition that would define Greek civilization. But their works were filled with ideas that seem far more advanced, even mystical, than what would be expected from the relatively primitive society from which they emerged. These thinkers explored concepts of sacred geometry, the nature of the soul, the interconnectedness of all things, and the underlying order of the universe. Could these ideas have been influenced by more ancient sources, cultures like the Minoans, the Egyptians, or even the lost civilization of Atlantis? Take Pythagoras, for example, known for his contributions to mathematics, especially the famous Pythagorean theorem. Pythagoras was also deeply interested in the mystical properties of numbers. He believed that the universe was governed by mathematical principles, and that numbers held sacred significance, controlling everything from the harmony of the cosmos to the rhythm of the human soul. But how did a man living in the relatively simple world of ancient Greece come to such profound insights? Some scholars suggest that Pythagoras' ideas were influenced by earlier traditions, particularly those of the Egyptians, who possessed an advanced understanding of geometry and astronomy. The Egyptians, with their sacred knowledge passed down through temples and priesthoods, were known to have explored the relationship between numbers and the cosmos long before Pythagoras. Heraclitus, too, spoke of concepts that seemed well beyond his time. He famously declared that you cannot step into the same river twice, suggesting that everything in the universe is in a constant state of flux, governed by a deeper eternal principle he called the Logos. This idea of a hidden order beneath the surface of chaotic change echoes philosophies found in many ancient traditions, where the idea of an eternal truth or law governing the universe was central. Heraclitus's teachings hinted at an advanced understanding of time, change, and existence, concepts that would only later be explored in modern science and philosophy. Then there is Plato, perhaps the most famous of all Greek philosophers, whose works are filled with allegories, metaphysical musings, and visions of ideal forms. In his dialogues, particularly in works like Philti the Republic and Phaedo, Plato discusses the concept of the world of forms, where true knowledge exists beyond the physical realm, in a realm of perfect, unchanging ideas. Plato's philosophy suggests a deep understanding of the dual nature of existence, the tangible, material world and the intangible, metaphysical one. This view has striking similarities to the teachings of the Egyptians, who believed in the division between the physical world and the realm of the divine. Plato's ideas may have been influenced by the hidden wisdom of ancient civilizations that saw the physical world as a mere reflection of a higher spiritual reality. But what if these ideas were not simply the products of Greek minds inventing new ways of thinking? What if they were rediscovering the knowledge of earlier civilizations? The Egyptians, for example, had long understood the connection between mathematics, astronomy, and the divine. The Minoans, with their advanced knowledge of geometry and the stars, left behind clues that suggest they, too, possessed a profound understanding of the cosmos. Even the legendary, lost civilization of Atlantis, described by Plato himself, is often interpreted as a metaphor for an advanced culture whose wisdom was lost after a great catastrophe. Could the Greeks have inherited this knowledge, or perhaps even learned it directly from these ancient cultures? Many of the philosophical teachings of the Greeks, particularly the ideas surrounding sacred geometry and the nature of existence, point to a deeper, more mystical knowledge that was not widely understood by the general population. Could these ideas have been passed down through secret societies or priesthoods, hidden from the public to maintain a sense of mystery and power? If the Greek philosophers were tapping into ancient wisdom, they were not merely creating new systems of thought, they were uncovering truths that had been obscured for millennia. Their work might have been a bridge between the lost knowledge of ancient civilizations and the intellectual currents that would define Western philosophy. The mystical teachings of the Greeks challenge our understanding of their intellectual heritage. Were they simply brilliant thinkers, or were they part of a greater tradition that had been deliberately concealed or forgotten? The rapid rise of philosophy in Greece could be seen as the rediscovery of knowledge that had been passed down from the distant past. Knowledge that, when it emerged into the public consciousness, reshaped the very fabric of Greek society and beyond. As we turn from these philosophical revelations to explore the societal and political structures of ancient Greece, we begin to see how these ideas, rooted in ancient wisdom, were woven into the very fabric of Greek civilization. The city-states, particularly Athens, would take these ideas and transform them into the foundations of democracy, ethics, and governance. But, as we explore the political evolution of Greece, we'll see that the philosophical ideals of the Greeks were not just abstract concepts. They were reflections of a deeper, hidden wisdom that had shaped their world for centuries. The political structure of ancient Greece, especially its most famous innovation, democracy, stands as one of the most significant contributions to the modern world. It is often presented as a triumph of the people, a system where power was handed directly to the citizens, an early experiment in participatory government that laid the groundwork for the democratic systems that would emerge centuries later. However, there is a darker side to this narrative, one that questions whether Greek democracy was truly a creation of the people, or whether it was influenced by hidden forces and a select few elites who guided the system from behind the scenes. The birth of democracy in Athens can be traced back to a series of political innovations by key figures like Solon and Cleisthenes. Solon, often heralded as the father of Athenian democracy, introduced sweeping reforms in the early 6th century BCE. He aimed to address the social and economic inequalities that had plagued Athens, creating a system of laws that granted greater rights to the lower classes and redistributed wealth more evenly. His reforms included the creation of a more inclusive political assembly, giving citizens the ability to participate in the decision-making process and introducing a series of economic policies to alleviate the burdens on the poor. Solon's reforms are often viewed as the foundation of Athenian democracy, an early step toward the ideal of political equality. Cleisthenes, another reformer in the late 6th century BCE, further expanded the democratic system, dividing Athens into new political districts and establishing a system of courts and councils that allowed for broader participation. The reforms of Cleisthenes are often seen as the final push toward full democracy, and it is during his time that Athens saw the birth of the political structures we associate with classical democracy: public debates, elections and decisions made by a body of citizens rather than a single ruler. These achievements are often celebrated as a victory of the people's power, with democracy arising from the collective will of the citizenry. But as we look deeper, we begin to see a more complex picture, one that raises the question of whether the real power in Athens truly rested with the citizens, or if it was subtly controlled by a few elites who held access to deeper knowledge. What if the very systems that enabled democracy to flourish were actually shaped and influenced by hidden forces, ancient knowledge, or foreign powers? It is tempting to view the birth of democracy as a purely organic development, a natural progression toward the ideal of political equality. However, historical records reveal that Athens was not the only civilization experimenting with governance during this time. Other cultures, particularly those in Egypt and Mesopotamia, had long established systems of administration, many of which were based on hierarchical, priestly control. Could it be that the Greek political innovations were not entirely new, but were influenced by these older systems, whose rulers held secret knowledge, perhaps even mystical or esoteric wisdom, that gave them an edge in maintaining control? This idea is further complicated by the role of Athens' elite families and their often unacknowledged influence over the political system. While Athens was the birthplace of democracy, it was also a society where power was concentrated in the hands of wealthy and influential families, many of whom had access to education and knowledge that was inaccessible to the common people. These elites had the resources to shape public opinion, influence the direction of political reforms, and, in some cases, manipulate the democratic process for their own benefit. Could it be that these families were using their influence to push forward a system that, while seemingly inclusive, allowed them to maintain control of the levers of power? Moreover, the Athenian democracy was not as inclusive as we often imagine. Women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded from the political process. The citizen body was not as large or as democratic as it might seem in retrospect. While the reforms of Solon and Cleisthenes gave a larger group of people a voice, the true power still rested with a select class. It's possible that these elites were aware of a greater truth, a hidden wisdom passed down from earlier, more ancient cultures. They may have used this knowledge to create systems that, while appearing democratic, were designed to keep true power in the hands of a few. The idea of hidden knowledge and esoteric wisdom is not new in ancient Greece. Throughout their history, the Greeks were deeply influenced by a number of mystery schools and secret societies, many of which were believed to hold knowledge about the divine, the cosmos, and the nature of reality. Could these ancient societies have played a role in shaping the political system of Athens? Did the elites who steered Athenian democracy possess secret knowledge that helped them maintain control over the democratic system? The answer is unclear, but the possibility that power in Athens was controlled by a hidden few, with access to knowledge that the general population did not share, cannot be dismissed. This line of thinking suggests that the democratic system of Athens, while groundbreaking and revolutionary in many respects, may have been influenced by forces that were far more secretive and less democratic than we imagine. What if the ideal of the people's rule was, in part, an illusion, a carefully crafted narrative that allowed the elites to maintain control while giving the appearance of a more inclusive political system? As we leave Athens behind and turn our gaze towards Sparta, we will see a stark contrast in political structure. Sparta was not a democracy, but a militaristic society ruled by a small group of elites. However, like Athens, it had its own systems of control and hidden wisdom, where the power of a select few shaped the course of Spartan society. The contrast between the two city-states, one democratic, the other oligarchic, offers fascinating insight into the varied ways in which ancient societies structured their power and how both systems may have been shaped by hidden forces and ancient knowledge. Sparta, an ancient city-state known for its iron discipline, legendary warriors, and ruthless efficiency. To the outside world, Sparta was the epitome of military prowess, a society dedicated entirely to warfare and survival. It is a place where young boys were trained from an early age to endure hardship, to fight without fear, and to live by a code of absolute loyalty and strength. But what if there's more to the story than the Spartan image of warriors and war? What if the true power of Sparta didn't just come from its discipline and military training, but from hidden knowledge, secret techniques passed down from a forgotten past, techniques that gave them an edge over all other Greek city-states? The Spartan way of life was shrouded in mystery, and much of what we know about them is filtered through the lens of Greek historians, who often romanticized or demonized their practices. Sparta's legendary training system, known as the Agage, was the backbone of their society. It was a brutal system, designed to mold young boys into warriors of unparalleled skill and endurance. At the age of 7, Spartan boys were taken from their families and placed into the Agage, where they underwent years of grueling physical and mental training. The Agage was not just a physical regime, but a process of indoctrination into the Spartan way of life, where obedience, loyalty, and toughness were instilled at every step. The physical training was intense. Boys were taught to fight, to march, to endure pain, and to survive in harsh conditions. But there was more to the Agage than just physicality. The Spartans believed that a true warrior had to be mentally and spiritually prepared as well. They were taught to suppress emotions, to maintain control at all times, and to view their comrades not as friends, but as fellow soldiers bound by a shared duty. The Agage instilled a sense of unity that was unmatched by any other Greek city-state, forging an unbreakable bond between the soldiers. But what if the discipline of the Agage went beyond mere militaristic necessity? What if it contained hidden teachings, wisdom passed down from ancient cultures, possibly from civilizations long forgotten? Some historians speculate that Sparta's success may not have been the result of conventional military strategy alone, but also of ancient techniques, lost or concealed, that gave them an advantage over their enemies. Was the Spartan system of training based on older esoteric knowledge that was passed down through generations? Ancient Greece was a melting pot of knowledge, influenced by earlier civilizations such as the Minoans and the Egyptians, both of which had advanced understanding of the human body, the mind, and warfare. Could Sparta have inherited some of these ancient practices, integrating them into their own system of training and discipline? The question of whether Sparta had access to secret teachings goes beyond mere speculation. There are accounts of Spartan warriors achieving feats of strength and endurance that defy explanation. Their training in the Agage was said to prepare them not only for physical battles, but for mental and spiritual challenges as well. The stories of their superhuman feats, like marching in formation for days without rest, or withstanding pain without flinching, suggest that Spartan warriors were tapping into a source of power that went beyond the mere physical. It's also worth considering the role of Spartan religion and mysticism in shaping their warrior society. Spartan society was deeply entwined with religious rituals, and the Spartans believed that their military prowess was not just the result of human effort, but of divine favor. They worshipped gods like Apollo, Artemis, and Athena, but the Spartan warrior culture was particularly aligned with the god Ares, the god of war. Could the Spartans have had access to religious or mystical practices that influenced their approach to warfare? Were there secret rituals, hidden from outsiders, that provided them with spiritual strength or insight into the art of war? What is most intriguing is the possibility that the Spartan military system was based on techniques passed down from civilizations that predated even the Mycenaeans. The Egyptians, with their long history of military prowess and advanced knowledge of the human body, or the Minoans, with their complex and mysterious culture, could have influenced the Spartans in ways that are not immediately obvious. These civilizations were known for their understanding of the human body, the art of warfare, and the mind-body connection. Could some of these techniques have been preserved in Spartan society, transmitted through secret teachings or rites? If so, Sparta's warriors would have been tapping into an ancient, almost forgotten knowledge that gave them an edge over their enemies, an advantage that was not just physical, but also mental and spiritual. The idea that Sparta's power came from something beyond mere military training raises fascinating possibilities. What if Sparta's warriors were not just the products of grueling discipline, but the inheritors of a secret tradition that gave them unparalleled strength and resilience? What if the key to their military success wasn't just the agoge, but a deeper, hidden knowledge that transcended time and culture? As we peel back the layers of Spartan society, the lines between myth and reality begin to blur. The Spartans were not just warriors, they were custodians of a mysterious tradition, one that might have been passed down from an ancient, forgotten civilization. Their strength, discipline, and ability to overcome any challenge could have been the result of far more than just military tactics. Could the Spartans, like the warriors of old, have been tapping into a lost wisdom, a knowledge so powerful that it turned them into legends? As we leave the secretive world of Sparta behind, we will turn our attention to the myths and legends that surrounded the Greek warriors, particularly the story of Troy. In many ways, the story of the Trojan War mirrors the Spartan ideal, a struggle for honor, glory, and survival, fought by men whose strength was as much spiritual as it was physical. But what if the stories of Troy, much like the Spartan way, contained hidden truths? Truths that might reveal the lost knowledge of an ancient, forgotten past. This transition will guide us deeper into the heart of Greek legend, where warriors and gods intertwine in ways that blur the line between reality and myth. The Trojan War, the story of heroes, gods, and a city besieged for 10 years. It is one of the most famous myths in Greek history, a tale of love, betrayal, and sacrifice that has been passed down through generations. The epic Iliad, written by Homer, immortalized the struggle between the Greeks and the Trojans, with its legendary characters like Achilles, Hector, and the cunning Odysseus. But what if the story of Troy was more than just a myth? What if the fall of Troy, long thought to be a purely mythical event, was actually based on a real historical conflict? What if the grand tale we've been told is not a work of fiction, but a distorted memory of a true and catastrophic event? For centuries, the story of the Trojan War was considered by many to be little more than an elaborate legend. The gods, the heroes, the wooden horse, all seemed to belong to the realm of myth rather than history. But in the 19th century, the discovery of the ancient city of Troy by the German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann began to change everything. Schliemann's excavations uncovered the remains of a city that seemed to match the descriptions given in the ancient texts. This discovery reignited the debate over the historicity of the Trojan War. Was Troy a real city? And if so, did the war actually take place? The evidence uncovered at the site of Troy, as well as other ancient texts and inscriptions, now suggests that the fall of Troy may have been based on real events, even if those events were later mythologized over time. Archaeological evidence from the site of Troy reveals a city that was destroyed multiple times throughout its history, with the most significant destruction occurring around the 12th century BCE, which aligns roughly with the timeline of the Trojan War as described in Homer's epics. The layers of ash, charred remains, and signs of violent destruction at the site suggest that Troy was indeed destroyed by a major conflict. But the nature of that destruction is still a subject of much debate. Was it the result of a military siege, as the Iliad suggests? Or was it caused by another kind of disaster, perhaps a natural catastrophe, like an earthquake or a volcanic eruption? Some scholars have proposed that the fall of Troy may have been the result of a broader collapse of several ancient civilizations in the eastern Mediterranean around the same time. This period, known as the Late Bronze Age collapse, around 1200 BCE, saw the sudden decline of major civilizations, including the Mycenaeans, the Hittites, and the Egyptians. Many of these cultures were interconnected through trade, alliances, and warfare, and their sudden downfall could have been caused by a combination of factors: invasions by mysterious groups like the Sea Peoples, internal uprisings, or catastrophic natural events. Could the fall of Troy have been part of this larger pattern of destruction, a traumatic event that was so significant that it became mythologized over time? The idea that the Trojan War was based on a real event, but was later transformed into myth, makes sense when we consider how such stories evolve over time. Events of great significance, especially those involving loss, destruction, and heroism, are often preserved in myth, where they are exaggerated, embellished, and reinterpreted to suit the values of the society telling the tale. The Greeks were a culture that revered heroes and gods, and it is not difficult to see how a real conflict, such as the fall of Troy, could have been transformed into a grand story of divine intervention and legendary warriors. The gods of Mount Olympus, who played such a prominent role in the Iliad, may have been added to the narrative to give the story a sense of divine purpose and grandeur, elevating it from a historical event to an epic of cosmic significance. But why would such a powerful historical event be so thoroughly mythologized? One possibility is that the memory of the Trojan War was so traumatic, so devastating, that it became a story that was too painful to tell in its original form. Like many historical events, the truth of what happened in Troy may have been obscured over time, either to protect the survivors or to give the story a more palatable, heroic veneer. The Greeks, particularly the Athenians, may have taken the tale of Troy and molded it into something more fitting for their cultural ideals. One where gods intervened, heroes were immortalized, and the ultimate destruction of the city was framed as a necessary and even noble sacrifice. This possibility challenges our understanding of the relationship between myth and history. While we often think of myths as being entirely separate from historical events, the story of Troy, and many other myths, suggests that there is often a kernel of truth hidden beneath the layers of legend. The Trojan War might have been a real event, its true nature lost to time, but preserved in the stories that followed. These stories passed down through the ages, not only told of the heroism and tragedy of Troy, but also of the fragile nature of civilization itself, how cities rise and fall, how cultures are built and destroyed, and how the human experience is shaped by forces both seen and unseen. The Trojan War, then, may not be just a myth. It may be a distorted memory of a real event, shaped by the passage of time and the imagination of generations of storytellers. The walls of Troy, which once stood as a symbol of power and pride, are now just ruins. But through the myth, the story endures, offering us a glimpse into a past that is both real and legendary, a past that continues to shape our understanding of history, heroism, and the very nature of human civilization. As we leave behind the myths of Troy, we begin to see how these legendary tales of gods, heroes, and wars are more than just stories. They may contain the keys to unlocking deeper truths about the lost civilizations of the ancient world, and the forces that shaped their rise and fall. These myths are not just entertainment, they are the echoes of a forgotten past, calling us to look deeper, to seek the truth hidden within the legends. Greek mythology has long captivated our imagination, filled with gods who control the heavens, monsters that roam the earth, and heroes who embark on impossible quests. But what if these tales, often thought of as pure fiction or allegories, actually carry hidden truths, knowledge from a distant past, long forgotten or obscured by time? What if, beneath the layers of myth and legend, these stories encoded real events, hidden wisdom, and ancient knowledge about the cosmos, the afterlife, and the human condition? Take, for instance, the labors of Hercules. This seemingly straightforward tale of a hero tasked with completing 12 impossible tasks has become one of the most enduring legends of ancient Greece. But could these labors symbolize more than just the feats of a mythical hero? What if Hercules' 12 tasks represent stages of an ancient spiritual journey, each labor a metaphor for overcoming trials of the mind, body, and spirit? Many of the tasks Hercules faced have deep symbolic meanings. The capture of the Erymanthian boar, the cleaning of the Augean stables, and the slaying of the Hydra all speak to themes of purification, control, and the triumph over inner darkness. Could these tasks be coded messages, preserving ancient knowledge about spiritual transformation and personal evolution? If we look at the myth through a lens of esoteric wisdom, we begin to see that the 12 labors might be telling us something much deeper about the nature of human existence and the path to enlightenment. Similarly, The story of the Tifti Odyssey offers more than just the adventurous tale of Odysseus' long journey home. On the surface, it is a story of a hero battling mythical creatures and enduring the wrath of gods, but beneath the surface lies a complex metaphor about the human soul's journey through life and death. The trials Odysseus faces, such as the encounter with the Cyclops, the temptation of the Sirens, and his journey into the underworld, reflect the human condition, our struggles with our own weaknesses, the temptations that pull us away from our higher purpose, and our inevitable confrontation with mortality. The Tifti Odyssey might not just be a tale of one man's journey home, but an allegory for the soul's journey through the challenges of life, seeking wisdom and understanding. Perhaps one of the most profound and mystical myths in Greek mythology is the story of Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, who is abducted by Hades and taken to the underworld. Persephone's descent into the underworld and her return to the earth each year represent the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. This myth speaks to the agricultural cycle, but it also contains hidden messages about the soul's journey through life and its eventual return to the divine source. Some interpretations suggest that Persephone's journey symbolizes the soul's descent into the material world, where it becomes trapped by illusion and suffering, and its eventual return to spiritual awakening. In this light, Persephone's story is not just about seasonal change, but about the transformation of the soul as it undergoes death and rebirth on a spiritual level. When we look at these myths through the lens of hidden knowledge, we begin to see that they may not simply be stories of gods and heroes, but allegories that encode deeper truths about the universe, the nature of human life, and the spiritual journey. These myths may have been crafted to preserve ancient wisdom, to pass down teachings about the cosmos, the nature of the soul, and the mysteries of existence. The ancient Greeks were not just telling tales for entertainment, they were preserving knowledge, hidden knowledge that, over time, became obscured as cultures changed, and the original meanings were lost. The idea that Greek myths contain hidden knowledge is not a new one. Throughout history, scholars and mystics have pointed out that many myths across different cultures share common themes and symbols, suggesting that they are not just isolated stories, but part of a greater, universal tradition of wisdom. For instance, the idea of a hero journeying into the underworld and returning is a theme found not only in Greek mythology, but also in the mythologies of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and even Native American cultures. The similarities between these stories suggest that they may all be pointing to the same ancient truths, preserved and passed down through different cultures in the form of myth. What if these stories, from Hercules' labors to Persephone's descent, were meant to encode the secrets of ancient civilizations? What if they contain knowledge about the universe's structure, the nature of life and death, or even advanced spiritual practices that were known to earlier civilizations? Knowledge that was kept hidden in plain sight, veiled by allegory, for reasons we may never fully understand. The possibility that Greek mythology holds the key to forgotten truths challenges the way we traditionally think about history and knowledge. These myths, far from being mere fiction, may be the remnants of a lost tradition, a tradition that once possessed profound wisdom about the universe and the nature of existence, wisdom that has been obscured over time, but still echoes through the stories we tell today. As we explore the deeper meanings within these myths, we uncover not only the truths about the ancient Greek world, but also insights into the mysteries of our own. The stories we have long considered to be mere entertainment or moral lessons might, in fact, be carrying profound secrets about the universe, the human soul, and the very fabric of reality itself. This realization opens the door to the possibility that the Greek myths are not just relics of a bygone age, but living messages, waiting to be rediscovered and understood. From here, we can begin to explore how these myths might not be isolated to Greek culture alone, but are connected to other ancient civilizations that also shared this hidden knowledge. The Egyptians, the Sumerians, and others all seem to have their own versions of these deep cosmic stories, suggesting a vast network of ancient wisdom that transcended cultures and time periods. This exploration of the interconnectedness of ancient civilizations and their myths will shed light on a forgotten, shared history, one that might hold the keys to understanding not just the past, but the future as well. Greek mythology is often seen as a product of a unique and isolated culture, with its gods, heroes, and tales firmly rooted in the soil of ancient Greece. But what if Greek mythology wasn't just the isolated creation of the Greeks, but a part of a larger, interconnected global story that spanned across ancient civilizations? What if the gods of Olympus, Zeus, Hermes, and Athena, had counterparts in far-flung cultures like Egypt and Mesopotamia? Could these connections between myths suggest that ancient societies shared a collective memory of a lost civilization, one whose wisdom and stories transcended borders and time? When we begin to compare the gods of Greek mythology with those of other ancient cultures, striking similarities begin to emerge. Take, for example, the mighty Zeus, the king of the Greek gods. Zeus wielded control over thunder and the heavens, a powerful figure who ruled over both gods and mortals alike. Now, look to Egypt, where the god Amun-Re, also a ruler of the heavens, controlled the forces of creation and destruction. Amun-Re shared many qualities with Zeus, including his supreme authority and his role as a father figure. The parallels between Zeus and Amun-Re suggest that these two deities, though from different cultures, may have derived from a similar archetype, a god who embodied the power of creation, destruction, and cosmic order. Similarly, Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods, finds his counterpart in the Egyptian god Thoth, the god of wisdom, writing, and communication. Thoth was often depicted as a scribe, recording the deeds of the gods and keeping the balance of the universe in order, very much like Hermes, who not only delivered messages between gods, but also served as a guide for souls in the afterlife. Both gods are associated with knowledge, language, and the movement between worlds, suggesting a shared understanding of the connection between the divine and the mortal, as well as the importance of communication and wisdom in maintaining cosmic harmony. These are just a few examples of the striking parallels between Greek gods and those from other ancient cultures. The Sumerian pantheon also offers many similarities to Greek mythology. The story of the Sumerian god Enki, for example, bears remarkable resemblance to the Greek god Prometheus. Enki, like Prometheus, defied the will of the gods to help humanity. Enki gave mankind the gift of wisdom, while Prometheus famously gave fire to the humans, an act of defiance that angered the gods. The myth of Enki and Prometheus serves as a powerful reminder that the stories of gods intervening in the affairs of humans were not isolated to Greece, but were part of a wider cultural narrative shared by ancient civilizations across the Mediterranean and the Near East. These connections suggest that ancient societies were not as isolated as we often think. The gods of Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and other ancient cultures were not simply individual creations, but shared elements of a larger, more universal tradition of myth-making. In fact, many of these civilizations were in contact with one another through trade, migration, and conquest, which likely facilitated the exchange of stories, religious practices, and even entire pantheons of gods. The similarities between Greek myths and those of other cultures point to the possibility of a global network of knowledge, a shared tradition of divine stories that crossed cultural and geographical boundaries, creating a collective memory of a lost civilization or a shared understanding of the divine. This interconnectedness of ancient myths challenges the conventional view that each civilization developed its own myths independently, in isolation from one another. Instead, it suggests that these myths were not just the products of individual cultures, but part of a broader cultural exchange, passed down through generations, adapted and reshaped by each society that inherited them. Perhaps these stories were more than just fables or allegories. They were vehicles for preserving the knowledge of ancient civilizations, knowledge that was passed down from one culture to the next, sometimes taking on new forms, but always retaining a core of universal truths. The possibility of a global network of knowledge and myth is further supported by the shared symbols and archetypes that appear across these cultures. The serpent, for example, appears in the mythology of many ancient civilizations, whether in the form of the Greek god Asclepius, the Egyptian god Wadjet, or the Sumerian god Ningish-Zida, representing healing, transformation, and the mysteries of life and death. Similarly, the flood myth, so central to the Bible and Greek mythology, appears in the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, suggesting a shared cultural memory of a great cataclysmic event that shaped the collective consciousness of these early societies. These shared myths and symbols hint at the existence of a more ancient, more sophisticated cultural network that existed long before the rise of the Greek city, states, one that spread knowledge, religion, and myth across vast distances. What if the Greek myths were just one piece of a much larger puzzle? A thread in the tapestry of ancient wisdom that connects civilizations as distant as Egypt, Sumer, and Greece. Could the gods and heroes of Greek mythology be reflections of a more ancient, forgotten civilization, whose knowledge of the cosmos, the divine, and the human condition was passed down, distorted but intact, through generations? As we examine these connections between Greek myths and the mythologies of other ancient cultures, we begin to see that the stories we know so well, stories of gods, heroes, and legendary creatures, might not be isolated to Greece at all. Instead, they are part of a larger, more mysterious network of knowledge that spans across ancient civilizations, pointing to a shared history and understanding of the divine that has been lost to time. These myths, far from being the product of one isolated culture, may be the echoes of an ancient wisdom, passed down through the ages and hidden within the stories of gods and men. This realization opens the door to further exploration. The myths of Greece, Egypt, and Mesopotamia may hold the keys to understanding real, ancient mysteries that have been passed down through the millennia, encoded in the very fabric of mythology. As we move forward, we will explore how these myths may have influenced one another, and how the rise of the Roman Empire may have contributed to the deliberate suppression of this hidden knowledge, pushing these ancient truths into the shadows of history. The fall of ancient Greece is often explained as a consequence of internal decay, military defeat, or economic collapse. Athens and Sparta, the shining examples of Greek civilization, were ultimately consumed by the very forces that once made them powerful: war, strife, and resource exhaustion. However, what if the story behind Greece's decline is not so simple? What if the collapse of the Greek city-states was not just the result of natural decline, but rather a much more orchestrated effort, one influenced by outside forces or hidden elites? Could the fall of Greece have been part of a deliberate strategy to suppress a civilization that had uncovered dangerous knowledge, one that posed a threat to established powers both within and beyond the Greek world? The Peloponnesian War, which raged from 431 to 404 BCE, provides a useful lens through which we can examine the internal struggles that contributed to Greece's collapse. Athens, once the center of intellectual and artistic achievement, faced off against the militaristic Spartan state in a war that drained both sides. The war led to widespread destruction, economic hardship, and political instability, ultimately weakening the once great Greek city-states. Yet, this war was more than just a struggle between two powerful cities. It also exposed deeper divisions within the Greek world, particularly between those who championed democracy and those who favored oligarchy. Athens, a beacon of democratic ideals, saw its political system falter during the war, while Sparta, although victorious, was ultimately unable to maintain the unity and stability it had once boasted. The war revealed the fragility of the Greek political systems, even as they stood at the height of their cultural and intellectual achievements. But the story of Greece's collapse doesn't end with the Peloponnesian War. The rise of Macedon in the 4th century BCE, under the leadership of King Philip II and his son, Alexander the Great, marked the end of the city-state era. Macedon's rise was not merely a natural consequence of military expansion, but a direct result of the internal weaknesses that had been sown during the years of Greek warfare. The Greek city-states, once fiercely independent, found themselves increasingly divided and weakened, unable to resist the unification efforts of Macedon. Philip II, a skilled strategist and political tactician, capitalized on these divisions, using both military force and diplomacy to subdue the Greek city-states, eventually bringing them under his control. Yet, the question remains, was the rise of Macedon simply the result of a more powerful neighbor? Or was it part of a larger, more coordinated effort to dismantle Greek independence? Some historians argue that the Macedonian conquests were not just the result of military superiority, but were also aided by outside forces, with a vested interest in the collapse of Greek political power. The Macedonians, under Philip and Alexander, absorbed much of the Greek intellectual legacy, but they also ensured that the Greek city states would never regain their former autonomy. In many ways, the rise of Macedon was a turning point in the broader struggle for control over Greek knowledge and influence, a pivotal moment when external forces were able to consolidate power over a civilization that had once seemed unstoppable. As the Greek city-states fell into decline, their intellectual and cultural achievements did not vanish. Instead, they were absorbed by the growing power of Rome, which would go on to dominate the Mediterranean world for centuries. The Romans admired Greek philosophy, art, and science, and they sought to integrate these elements into their own empire. But this integration was not without its consequences. The Romans, though deeply influenced by Greek culture, were also keen to control and manipulate that knowledge for their own purposes. Could the Romans have deliberately altered or suppressed certain aspects of Greek knowledge in order to shape a new narrative, one that served their own political and cultural agenda? It is possible that, as Greece fell to external pressures, certain aspects of its intellectual legacy were deliberately altered, hidden, or distorted to fit the new Roman worldview. The fall of Greece, then, could be seen not only as the result of internal decay and external pressures, but also as part of a larger, more deliberate effort to suppress a civilization whose knowledge posed a threat to the established powers of the time. Whether through war, political manipulation, or cultural assimilation, the decline of Greece and the rise of Rome represent a shifting of power, a moment when the intellectual and cultural treasures of Greece were either absorbed into a new system or deliberately suppressed. This raises an unsettling question. Could the real reason for Greece's fall be more than just military defeat or political collapse? Could it be the result of a more insidious effort to control and obscure the knowledge that Greece had uncovered about the cosmos, the human condition, and the nature of existence itself? As we transition from the decline of Greece to the rise of Rome, we begin to see how the ancient world was shaped by forces that sought to control knowledge and power. The Romans did not merely inherit Greek knowledge, they also reinterpreted it, shaping it to fit their own needs and consolidating their empire's authority. The fall of Greece, and the eventual absorption of its knowledge into the Roman world, represents a critical moment in history, a moment when the intellectual and cultural foundations of one civilization were subsumed by another. This sets the stage for the next chapter in our exploration: how Rome, in its quest for control and power, altered the course of history by reshaping the very knowledge that Greece had uncovered. The rise of Rome represents a monumental shift in the Mediterranean world, as the once fragmented city-states of Greece were absorbed into the growing empire. But as Rome expanded, so too did its absorption of Greek culture, knowledge, and traditions. The Romans, who admired Greek art, philosophy, and political systems, eagerly adopted and adapted much of Greek civilization. However, the question remains, did Rome merely inherit Greek wisdom, or was there a more calculated effort to reshape and control it? The extent to which Rome not only absorbed, but potentially redefined Greek knowledge, raises important questions about the interplay between power and intellectual inheritance. At first glance, it seems as though Rome simply embraced the cultural and intellectual achievements of Greece, particularly after its conquest of the Greek world. Roman leaders, poets, and scholars were quick to recognize the brilliance of Greek philosophy, politics, and art, and they sought to incorporate these elements into their own society. Greek philosophy, with its emphasis on reason, ethics, and metaphysics, found a receptive audience in Roman intellectual circles. Philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates became the intellectual foundation upon which many Roman thinkers built their own ideas. Yet, there is a subtle undercurrent to this adoption of Greek thought. While the Romans were eager to incorporate Greek ideas, they also reshaped them to suit their own political and cultural needs. The Roman state, with its strong emphasis on order, law, and imperial authority, sought to mold Greek philosophy into a tool for maintaining the empire's power structure. The Stoic philosophy of Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, for example, became a cornerstone of Roman thought. Stoicism, which emphasized self-control, duty, and rationality, was particularly attractive to Roman leaders, who saw in it a way to reinforce their values of discipline and loyalty. However, the Stoic ideas that emerged in Rome were often more pragmatic and focused on maintaining social harmony than on the deeper metaphysical inquiries of earlier Greek Stoics like Zeno. The influence of Greek philosophy on Rome wasn't confined to academic circles, it also permeated Roman politics. The Roman political system, particularly in its early days, was heavily influenced by Greek models of democracy and governance. The Roman Republic borrowed much from Greek democratic practices, particularly from Athens. However, the Romans took these Greek ideas and adapted them to their own needs, creating a system that prioritized stability and control over the more egalitarian ideals of the Greeks. The Roman Senate, while modeled after Greek institutions, was ultimately an oligarchic body that ensured power remained in the hands of a select few. Rome's political leaders understood that while Greek political ideals could offer guidance, they needed to be carefully controlled and reinterpreted to fit within the Roman Empire's hierarchical structure. Beyond philosophy and politics, the Romans also appropriated Greek art, literature, and mythology. Roman art was deeply influenced by Greek styles and techniques, and many of Rome's greatest works of art and architecture were modeled after Greek originals. Greek myths, too, were adopted by the Romans, but often with a twist. Roman mythology absorbed the gods and stories of Greece, but they were reinterpreted to align with Roman values. For instance, the Greek god Ares became the Roman god Mars, the embodiment of military prowess and strength, reflecting Rome's own militaristic nature. The myths of heroes like Heracles and Achilles were repurposed to emphasize Roman ideals of virtue, sacrifice, and the glory of the state. Through these adaptations, Rome ensured that Greek mythology continued to thrive, but it was redefined in a way that reflected the values of Roman imperialism. Despite the apparent harmony between Greek and Roman cultures, there were deeper currents at play that suggested a deliberate attempt to control and shape the flow of knowledge. Roman leaders understood that controlling knowledge, particularly philosophical and intellectual traditions, was essential to maintaining power. Greek thought, with its emphasis on individualism, free thought, and questioning authority, had the potential to undermine the very structures of Roman power. As a result, certain aspects of Greek philosophy and knowledge were either suppressed or diluted to fit Roman agendas. For example, the more radical elements of Greek philosophy, such as the teachings of the pre-Socratics or the mystery schools that explored esoteric knowledge, were not as easily absorbed into Roman culture. These teachings, which delved into metaphysical concepts and the mysteries of the universe, were often kept hidden or relegated to the fringes of Roman society. The Roman elite, focused on stability and control, had little interest in the more subversive aspects of Greek knowledge. Instead, they embraced those elements of Greek thought that could reinforce their worldview, turning philosophy into a tool of statecraft rather than a vehicle for revolutionary change. This manipulation of Greek knowledge raises the question: was the rise of Rome merely a case of intellectual inheritance, or was it part of a larger, more calculated effort to reshape and control the knowledge of the ancient world? The Roman Empire, in its quest for dominance, did not just absorb Greek ideas, it also redefined them, molding them into a form that could serve Roman imperial interests. By controlling how Greek knowledge was transmitted and interpreted, the Romans ensured that the intellectual legacy of Greece would serve the empire's needs, not its own. As we transition into the next chapter, we will explore how the knowledge and philosophy of the Greeks were preserved, or suppressed, throughout the Middle Ages and Renaissance. The rise of Rome marks a critical turning point in the history of Greek thought, but it is during the subsequent centuries that we will see the full impact of Roman control over this knowledge. Did the Romans successfully preserve Greek wisdom, or did they erase parts of it altogether, shaping the course of Western intellectual history in ways we are only beginning to understand? The story of ancient Greece is not just one of intellectual and artistic achievement, it is also one of profound loss and suppression. As Greece fell and the Roman Empire rose, much of the knowledge that had been cultivated by Greek philosophers, scientists, and mystics was systematically hidden, altered, or destroyed. While the Romans admired Greek wisdom and adopted much of it, there were aspects of Greek thought, especially those that challenged the status quo, that were deliberately concealed. And as Christianity became the dominant force in the Western world, the suppression of pagan knowledge escalated, resulting in the erasure of ancient wisdom that was deemed dangerous, subversive, or incompatible with the new religious order. But why was this knowledge so threatening? And what wisdom was buried, hidden from the public, and why was it deemed too dangerous to be shared? the rise of Christianity marked a significant shift in the intellectual landscape of the Roman Empire. As the Christian Church became more powerful, it sought to suppress philosophical teachings that contradicted its doctrines. Greek philosophy, particularly the works of the pre-Socratics, Plato and Aristotle, posed a direct challenge to the Christian worldview. Greek philosophy emphasized reason, logic, and the pursuit of knowledge, sometimes even questioning the existence of the gods, while Christianity presented a theological system that relied on faith, divine revelation, and the authority of Scripture. The tension between these two systems of thought led to the deliberate suppression of certain philosophical ideas, particularly those that questioned the divine authority or espoused alternative understandings of the cosmos and humanity. One of the most famous examples of this suppression is the destruction of the Library of Alexandria. The library, a center of learning and scholarship in the ancient world, contained a vast collection of texts from across the Mediterranean, including many works of Greek philosophy, science, and mathematics. Its destruction, particularly during the Roman conquest of Egypt, and later under the early Christian Empire, marked the loss of countless manuscripts that might have shed light on ancient wisdom. The burning of the library is often seen as the symbolic beginning of a larger effort to erase or control knowledge. Some believe that the destruction was not merely accidental, but a deliberate act to eliminate the ancient wisdom that was seen as a threat to the new religious and political order. What if the knowledge contained within those scrolls was considered too dangerous, too contrary to the growing influence of Christianity, and needed to be erased to maintain the new cultural narrative? Beyond the physical destruction of texts, there was also the intellectual suppression of Greek philosophical teachings. Early Christian thinkers like St. Augustine and others worked to reinterpret or demonize the ancient pagan philosophers, branding them as heretics or idolaters. As the Church gained power, it promoted a view of the world that emphasized salvation through faith and obedience to divine authority, and it sought to limit the influence of philosophical schools that questioned or undermined this narrative. Greek thinkers like Heraclitus, who believed that the universe was governed by an underlying impersonal principle, and Pythagoras, with his mystical teachings on numbers and the cosmos, were marginalized, and their works either lost or reinterpreted to fit a Christian worldview. This period of suppression also gave rise to the concept of forbidden knowledge, wisdom that was deemed too dangerous or heretical to be shared with the masses. Some of the esoteric knowledge of ancient Greece, particularly those teachings that dealt with the nature of the soul, the cosmos, and the hidden aspects of reality, was pushed to the fringes of society. Mystery schools, like those of the Pythagoreans and the followers of Plato's Academy, preserved ancient knowledge in secret, passing it down through select initiates. This knowledge, which included concepts of sacred geometry, the divine order of the universe, and the nature of human consciousness, was kept hidden from the public eye, seen as too potent for the uninitiated to understand. The suppression of this knowledge was not just an intellectual effort, it was an effort to control the flow of ideas and maintain religious and political power. Those who possessed this forbidden knowledge had the potential to challenge the very fabric of society, and as a result, it was deliberately concealed, its existence hidden from the general populace. The notion of hidden or suppressed knowledge extends beyond just the philosophical traditions of Greece. Much of the ancient world's understanding of the cosmos, the human soul, and even the laws of nature were preserved in secret teachings that were not accessible to the masses. These teachings, passed down through the centuries by select groups and societies, would later influence the intellectual movements of the Renaissance, when many of the lost ideas and texts would be rediscovered, reinterpreted, and integrated into the fabric of Western thought. As we explore the suppression of knowledge during the fall of Greece and the rise of Rome, it becomes clear that the struggle was not just for political control, but for control over knowledge itself. The knowledge of the ancient world, especially that which came from Greece, was seen as a threat to the established order, and those in power took great pains to bury it, either through destruction or reinterpretation. But this knowledge did not disappear. It lay dormant for centuries, hidden from public view, until it was rediscovered during the Renaissance, when scholars began to unearth the forgotten texts and teachings of the ancient world. The suppression of Greek wisdom during the rise of Rome and the dominance of Christianity sets the stage for the eventual rediscovery of this knowledge. As we move into the next chapter, we will explore how the ancient wisdom of Greece along with other lost knowledge, re-emerged during the Renaissance, and how it sparked a renewed interest in the esoteric and philosophical teachings that had been concealed for so long. The cycle of rediscovery would continue, as the hidden truths of the ancient world slowly began to reassert themselves in the minds of thinkers, artists, and philosophers, ultimately influencing the course of Western history. The Renaissance, an era of intellectual and artistic flourishing that spanned from the 14th to the 17th centuries, was a period of profound transformation when Europe rediscovered the knowledge of the ancients. After centuries of intellectual stagnation, the rediscovery of ancient texts ignited a cultural revolution that reshaped Western civilization. But the question remains, what secrets did these Renaissance scholars uncover from the ancients? And were some of these texts, intentionally or otherwise, kept hidden because of what they revealed? During the Renaissance, the study of ancient Greek and Roman works came to the forefront, largely driven by a new generation of intellectuals who sought to revive the classical ideas of philosophy, science, and literature. Key figures such as Petrarch, Erasmus, and the humanists were at the vanguard of this intellectual movement. Petrarch, often called the father of humanism, was among the first to embrace the value of ancient texts, urging scholars to look back to the works of classical authors for wisdom. Petrarch's discovery of Cicero's letters, among other ancient manuscripts, sparked a renewed interest in the classical world, laying the foundation for the intellectual revival that would follow. Erasmus, another prominent figure of the Renaissance, further advanced this movement by publishing Greek and Latin editions of the Bible, emphasizing the importance of returning to the original texts of antiquity. His work helped to correct the errors in the Latin Vulgate, the Bible that had been used by the Catholic Church for centuries, and provided a clearer understanding of the Scriptures. Erasmus and his contemporaries believed that true knowledge could only be gained by going back to the sources, both philosophical and religious, to uncover the truths that had been obscured by centuries of Christian interpretations and medieval scholasticism. But the rediscovery of ancient knowledge wasn't just a revival of philosophy and literature. It also reintroduced the mathematical, scientific, and mystical knowledge of the Greeks. Scholars like Leonardo da Vinci and Johannes Kepler began to apply the ancient principles of geometry, physics, and astronomy in their work, building on the knowledge passed down from the Greeks. The Renaissance saw the development of new scientific methods, inspired by the ancient Greeks, that would later give rise to the scientific revolution. Figures like Galileo and Copernicus, who challenged the geocentric model of the universe, drew heavily on the works of ancient astronomers, especially those of Ptolemy and Archimedes. However, while many ancient works were being recovered and celebrated, the process of rediscovery was not without its complexities. The Renaissance was not simply a straightforward revival of ancient ideas. Some scholars and intellectuals took liberties with the ancient texts, interpreting them through the lens of their own time and shaping them to fit the cultural and religious norms of the Renaissance. Moreover, certain texts, especially those that dealt with esoteric or mystical knowledge, were deliberately kept from the mainstream. The teachings of the mystery schools, the hidden philosophies of the Greeks, and the more speculative aspects of ancient science and metaphysics were often excluded from the intellectual revival, perhaps because they posed too great a challenge to the religious and political authorities of the time. For example, the works of Plato and Pythagoras were highly influential, but some of their more mystical ideas about sacred geometry, the structure of the cosmos, and the relationship between numbers and the divine were often sidelined or diluted. The concept of a divine, intelligent order governing the universe was central to many of the ancient Greek thinkers, yet these ideas were often reinterpreted or downplayed in favor of more rational, human-centered philosophy. The hidden aspects of Greek knowledge, such as those found in the Hermetic texts or the Pythagorean teachings on the divine nature of numbers, were relegated to the fringes of Renaissance thought. This leads to the tantalizing question: what if the Renaissance wasn't a true rediscovery, but rather a partial revival of ancient wisdom, one that left certain dangerous truths deliberately obscured or hidden? Could some of the more profound insights of the ancient world, those that transcended mere intellectual curiosity and delved into metaphysics and spirituality, have been intentionally suppressed? After all, The Renaissance occurred during a time of significant religious and political upheavals. The Catholic Church, which held great sway over intellectual life in Europe, had a vested interest in controlling knowledge, particularly knowledge that might undermine its doctrines. The Church had long suppressed what it considered heretical ideas, including those that came from the ancient Greek philosophers, and would continue to do so throughout the Renaissance and beyond. Perhaps the most significant example of this suppression lies in the treatment of the Hermetic writings, attributed to the legendary figure Hermes Trismegistus. These texts, which blended Greek philosophy with Egyptian mystical thought, were highly influential during the Renaissance, yet much of their content, dealing with alchemy, astrology, and the nature of divine wisdom, was carefully controlled and often kept within secret circles. The idea of forbidden knowledge, wisdom so powerful it could alter the course of human understanding, permeated Renaissance intellectual life, suggesting that some truths were intentionally concealed for fear of the disruption they could cause. The question of what knowledge was hidden or suppressed during the Renaissance is a fascinating one, and it opens the door to a much larger exploration of the role of knowledge in shaping civilizations. The rediscovery of ancient Greek texts was not just an intellectual revolution, it was a battle for control over the past and its wisdom. As Renaissance scholars unearthed the works of Aristotle, Plato, and others, they also grappled with the implications of these texts on their own worldview. The full scope of what was recovered and what was left behind holds clues to understanding the tensions between knowledge and power in this transformative period. As we continue exploring the impact of the Renaissance on the modern world, it's essential to ask, was the knowledge that emerged during this period truly the full extent of ancient wisdom, or was it only a partial recovery of ideas, carefully curated and controlled for political, religious, and social reasons? The Renaissance was a time of great intellectual renewal, but it was also a time of careful preservation and careful omission of knowledge that may have been too radical, too subversive, or too dangerous to be allowed to flourish. This rediscovery of ancient knowledge set the stage for the next chapter in the journey of human thought, the scientific and philosophical revolutions that would follow. Greek philosophy did not simply reappear during the Renaissance. It resurfaced like a long-buried current of thought that began quietly shaping the course of Western civilization. When scholars dusted off the works of Plato, Aristotle, and the pre-Socratics, they weren't just rediscovering old ideas. They were touching the roots of a worldview that would guide science, politics, and ethics for centuries to come. And yet, beneath the familiar story of rationalism and reason lies a deeper mystery. What if the true legacy of Greek philosophy wasn't the rise of scientific thinking alone, but a hidden, mystical undercurrent that continued to influence the world in ways few recognized? As Renaissance thinkers pored over ancient texts, they found in Greek philosophy a new way to approach knowledge, one that relied on logic, observation, and the pursuit of truth. Thinkers like Descartes, Spinoza, and Kant drew heavily from the Greeks, modeling their own ideas on ancient frameworks. Descartes admired the Greek emphasis on reason, using it to build his method of systematic doubt. Spinoza looked to the Greeks for guidance in understanding the structure of reality, shaping his own philosophy around a unified, ordered universe. Kant, too, was profoundly influenced by Greek thought, particularly the idea that human reason could uncover universal principles governing both nature and morality. But while the rational side of Greek philosophy shaped the Enlightenment and modern science, another side, one far more mystical, remained in the shadows. The Greeks were not just rational thinkers. Many of their greatest ideas were infused with mystery. Pythagoras saw numbers not simply as mathematical tools, but as sacred symbols that revealed the hidden architecture of the cosmos. Plato spoke of the realm of forms, a world beyond the physical. Heraclitus described a universe shaped by an unseen harmony. These ideas pointed to a reality where logic and intuition were intertwined, where the material and immaterial worlds were part of the same grand design. During the Renaissance, however, the mystical elements of Greek philosophy were often pushed aside in favor of the more rational ones. As Europe moved toward scientific discovery, the metaphysical dimensions of Greek thought became inconvenient, too elusive, too difficult to control, too threatening to established religious authority. And so, while rationalism flourished, the mystical teachings were quietly marginalized. Yet, they did not disappear. They survived in the writings of certain scholars, hidden in esoteric societies and whispered through traditions that kept alive the spiritual wisdom of the ancient world. The scientific revolution, ironically, was deeply rooted in Greek ideas about uncovering hidden truths. Galileo, Kepler, and Newton all drew inspiration from the Greek belief that the universe was governed by laws that could be understood through reason. This idea, so central to modern science, originated with ancient philosophers who believed that reality followed a deep and harmonious order. Even as the mystical side faded from public view, it lingered beneath the surface, shaping the mindset of those who sought to understand not only how the universe worked, but why it was designed the way it was. As the modern world evolved, the influence of Greek philosophy continued to reach into politics and ethics as well. The democratic ideals of ancient Athens inspired the political revolutions of Europe and America, while Greek debates about virtue, justice, and the good life became the foundation for modern moral philosophy. Yet these contributions represent only part of the story. Behind them lies a more enigmatic legacy, one built on the idea that human beings are part of something larger, that knowledge is not just intellectual but experiential, and that the universe is far more mysterious than it appears. Perhaps the true impact of Greek philosophy is not only what it openly gave to the modern world, but what it quietly preserved, a reminder that even in an age driven by science and reason, there remain echoes of a deeper wisdom, a hidden worldview that invites us to question the nature of existence itself. And as we turn toward the mysteries that linger in the ancient world, its unexplained gaps, its cosmic insights, and its forgotten technologies, we begin to see just how much remains undiscovered, waiting in the shadows of history. The ancient Greeks are often hailed as the intellectual giants who laid the foundation for Western science and philosophy. Figures like Pythagoras, Aristotle, and Euclid made groundbreaking contributions to mathematics, astronomy, and logic, which influenced not just their own time but the entire trajectory of intellectual history. But how much of their knowledge about the cosmos was truly their own, and how much was inherited from forgotten or suppressed traditions? As we delve into the astronomical and mathematical achievements of the Greeks, we begin to ask a more provocative question. Could the ancient Greeks have known more about the structure of the universe than modern science has yet uncovered? Pythagoras, known for his contributions to mathematics, is perhaps most famous for the Pythagorean theorem. However, his ideas about the cosmos were far more expansive and mystical. He believed that the universe was governed by numbers, and that everything, from the movements of the stars to the harmony of music, was based on mathematical principles. Pythagoras and his followers, the Pythagoreans, regarded numbers as sacred and saw them as the key to understanding the hidden order of the universe. Their theories about the cosmos extended beyond mere mathematics into the realm of metaphysics, suggesting that the physical universe and its laws were tied to deeper spiritual truths. Pythagoras' concept of the music of the spheres was one of his most fascinating ideas. He believed that the movements of the planets and stars created a kind of celestial music, an inaudible harmony that governed the cosmos. This idea not only reflects an advanced understanding of geometry and mathematics, but hints at a more mystical view of the universe that was woven into the fabric of Greek thought. It's possible that the Greeks didn't just see the cosmos as a mechanical system, but as an interconnected whole where harmony, balance, and proportion were key to understanding both the physical and spiritual dimensions of existence. Aristotle, the towering figure in Greek philosophy, also had a significant impact on our understanding of the heavens. His model of the universe, with the Earth at the center and the stars and planets revolving around it in perfect circular orbits, was widely accepted for centuries. Aristotle's ideas on astronomy were deeply influential, but as we look at his work with a modern perspective, we realize how much of his thinking was shaped by the intellectual frameworks of his time. While Aristotle's model of the universe was later replaced by the heliocentric model proposed by Copernicus, his work laid important groundwork for future astronomical developments. But it is also worth considering whether the ancient Greeks had access to even more advanced astronomical knowledge that was later lost, suppressed, or forgotten. Consider the possibility that the Greeks had access to information that went beyond what is recorded in their surviving texts. Ancient cultures, including the Greeks, had a deep interest in the stars and the cosmos, often linking their observations of the heavens to religious and philosophical ideas. Could the Greeks have had access to advanced technologies perhaps ancient knowledge passed down from earlier civilizations, that allowed them to understand the cosmos in ways we are only now beginning to understand. The idea that the ancient Greeks were in possession of advanced astronomical knowledge is intriguing, especially when we consider the precision with which they were able to track the movements of celestial bodies. The Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek analog computer, offers tantalizing evidence that the Greeks may have had far more advanced technological knowledge than we previously believed. Discovered in a shipwreck off the coast of the Greek island Antikythera in 1901, this device was used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses. Its complexity, having gears that corresponded to the movements of celestial bodies, suggests that the Greeks had a level of mechanical engineering that was far ahead of its time. Could the knowledge embedded in this device be a clue to a broader understanding of the cosmos that was lost over time? Moreover, the Greeks were not alone in their fascination with the stars. The Egyptians, Babylonians, and Sumerians also had advanced astronomical traditions, and there is evidence of knowledge exchange between these ancient cultures. Was the knowledge the Greeks possessed inherited from these earlier civilizations, or was it the product of their own observations and discoveries? The idea that the Greeks were part of a larger, interconnected network of ancient civilizations with access to esoteric knowledge is an intriguing one, especially when we consider how much of this knowledge has been lost or suppressed throughout history. The question then arises, if the ancient Greeks possessed such advanced understanding of the universe, why is it that much of their knowledge seems to have been forgotten or obscured? Could the suppression of certain teachings, especially those related to mysticism, metaphysics, and the hidden structure of the cosmos, be tied to the rise of new political and religious powers? As we move forward in history, the rise of empires like Rome, and later the dominance of the Christian Church, may have played a role in relegating certain aspects of Greek thought to the margins of intellectual history, suppressing ideas that didn't fit within the dominant worldview. What if the ancient Greeks knew more about the universe than we have ever realized? What if their advanced knowledge was lost, hidden, or deliberately suppressed, its secrets waiting to be uncovered? As we continue to explore the mysteries of the ancient world, the possibility remains that there are deeper truths about the cosmos that the Greeks understood, but that have yet to be fully rediscovered. This section sets the stage for the final chapter of our journey through the Greek legacy, where we will explore the lasting impact of Greek knowledge on the modern world and how these ancient mysteries continue to shape our understanding of the universe today. The questions raised by the Greeks about the cosmos, the nature of existence, and the pursuit of knowledge remain unanswered, inviting us to look deeper into the ancient past and ask, what have we missed? What hidden truths are still waiting to be discovered? The quest to uncover the lost knowledge of ancient Greece continues to captivate researchers, archaeologists, and historians alike. For centuries, we have marveled at the brilliance of Greek civilization, its philosophers, mathematicians, and artists, and yet much of their wisdom remains hidden or obscured. As modern technologies and research methods advance, new discoveries are being made that shed light on the mysteries of Greece, hinting that the secrets of this ancient world may still be waiting to be uncovered. The question we must ask is, what if the ancient Greek knowledge we seek, knowledge that has the potential to reshape our understanding of history, has been lying dormant, waiting to be rediscovered? One of the most remarkable recent discoveries is the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient analog computer found in a shipwreck off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera. The device, which dates back to around 100 BCE, has astounded scientists and historians alike with its complexity. It was used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses, making it the earliest known device of its kind. What is even more astonishing is the level of mechanical sophistication it demonstrates: gears, dials, and an intricate system that corresponds to the movements of celestial bodies. This discovery has led some scholars to suggest that the ancient Greeks had far more advanced technological knowledge than previously thought. Could this device be a glimpse into a deeper, forgotten understanding of the universe, hidden for millennia? The Antikythera mechanism is just one example of how modern archaeologists are uncovering pieces of lost knowledge that challenge our understanding of Greek science and technology. These findings suggest that the Greeks may have been far ahead of their time, not only in their intellectual pursuits, but also in their technological and engineering capabilities. While we often think of ancient Greece as a society defined by its philosophical achievements, discoveries like the Antikythera mechanism remind us that the Greeks also had a profound understanding of mechanics, astronomy, and mathematics, knowledge that was far more advanced than what we might expect from a society so long ago. Beyond artifacts, contemporary researchers are also revisiting ancient texts and manuscripts to uncover hidden meanings and forgotten knowledge. The resurgence of interest in the works of Plato, Pythagoras, and the pre-Socratics has led to a renewed effort to decipher their more esoteric teachings. While many of their ideas were considered mere philosophical musings in their time, modern scholars are beginning to explore the possibility that these writings contained deeper, more profound insights into the nature of reality, consciousness, and the cosmos, ideas that may have been deliberately suppressed or misunderstood over the centuries. One of the most intriguing aspects of this modern search is the renewed interest in Greek mysticism and esoteric knowledge. The Pythagoreans, for example, believed that numbers were not just tools of calculation, but held a sacred significance that could reveal the hidden structure of the universe. Similarly, Plato's concept of the forms, a realm of perfect unchanging ideals, has taken on new relevance in contemporary philosophy and metaphysics. These ideas, once thought to be abstract or purely philosophical, are now being revisited by researchers in the fields of quantum mechanics, consciousness studies, and even spirituality. Could the ancient Greeks have understood aspects of the universe that modern science is only beginning to uncover? In addition to the intellectual rediscovery, modern archaeology continues to uncover physical evidence that challenges our understanding of ancient Greek civilization. Excavations at ancient sites like Delphi, Knossos, and Athens are constantly revealing new insights into the technological and cultural achievements of the Greeks. From advanced plumbing systems in the Palace of Knossos to the precise alignments of ancient Greek temples with celestial events, these discoveries show that the Greeks were not just thinkers, but also highly skilled engineers and scientists. The search for lost Greek knowledge is not just a matter of uncovering ancient artifacts, it's a search for deeper understanding. What if the knowledge the Greeks possessed about the cosmos, the human soul, and the natural world was far more advanced than we ever realized? Could it be that these secrets were hidden from the public, deliberately suppressed to maintain control over power structures, or lost to the ravages of time? As we look toward the future, the modern search for ancient Greek knowledge continues to raise profound questions. What if the answers we are seeking are still out there, hidden beneath the surface of ancient ruins, or encoded in forgotten texts? What if the Greek wisdom that shaped Western civilization is only part of the story, and the true depth of their knowledge has yet to be fully understood? These are the mysteries that continue to captivate us, urging us to question the past and explore the untold stories that remain buried in the sands of history. The quest for Greek secrets is far from over. With every new discovery, we inch closer to understanding the true legacy of this ancient civilization and the profound knowledge it may have possessed. As we continue to search for answers, we are reminded of the timeless appeal of ancient Greece, its ideas, its innovations, and its mysteries. What if the secrets of ancient Greece aren't just relics of the past, but keys to unlocking new understandings of our world? The search is ongoing, and the possibilities are endless. This final exploration of the ancient Greek legacy is a call to action, urging the audience to continue questioning the past and delving into the forgotten history of Greece. The lost knowledge of the Greeks may still hold the answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask, and as we continue to unearth these mysteries, we open the door to a future where the secrets of the past may shape the world of tomorrow. Throughout this journey, we have uncovered layers of mystery surrounding ancient Greece, an extraordinary civilization whose intellectual and cultural achievements continue to shape our modern world. But as we delve deeper, we find that Greece was not only the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and art, it was also a repository of hidden knowledge, ancient secrets, and unanswered questions that persist today. The story of Greece is not just one of foundational ideas, but one of enduring enigmas, as much about what we don't yet know as what we do. What if the ancient Greeks knew far more than we have credited them with? From the sophisticated astronomical insights embedded in the Antikythera mechanism to the mystical ideas of sacred geometry and the nature of the cosmos, The Greeks may have held knowledge that is only now beginning to reveal itself. While their rational, scientific contributions laid the groundwork for Western thought, could there have been hidden layers, philosophies and technologies that were suppressed or lost over time? As we explored in the previous chapters, the Greeks' intellectual legacy extends beyond what is commonly understood. The Greek myths, for example, may not just be stories of gods and heroes, but encoded knowledge about the universe, the human soul, and the hidden forces that govern reality. From Pythagoras' belief in the harmony of the spheres to Plato's concept of the forms, the Greeks seem to grasp a vision of the cosmos that combined rational observation with metaphysical speculation. These ideas not only challenged the boundaries of their time, but continue to inspire contemporary thinkers in fields as diverse as philosophy, quantum physics, and metaphysics. The rise of Rome, the dominance of Christianity, and the suppression of knowledge during the Middle Ages all played a role in obscuring certain aspects of Greek thought. Yet, the Renaissance marked a turning point when scholars began to rediscover ancient Greek texts and ideas. The excitement surrounding the rediscovery of Greek philosophy sparked a renewed interest in human potential and the mysteries of the universe. But even then, certain aspects of Greek knowledge remained hidden or underappreciated. The rediscovery was not complete. Many texts and teachings remained locked away in secret societies or esoteric traditions. What if the greatest discoveries about ancient Greece are still waiting to be uncovered? As modern archaeologists, historians, and researchers continue their work, new findings continue to emerge, challenging our understanding of Greek science, technology, and philosophy. The Antikythera mechanism, the mysteries of sacred geometry, and the exploration of hidden aspects of Greek thought all suggest that the Greeks may have understood more about the universe and our place in it than we can fully grasp today. This documentary has only scratched the surface of the many questions that remain. The true origins of Greek civilization, the hidden meanings behind their myths, and the deeper implications of their philosophies continue to intrigue and inspire us. What if the secrets of ancient Greece are still out there, waiting to be rediscovered? The search is far from over. As we conclude this journey, we leave you with a sense of wonder, a reminder that the mysteries of ancient Greece are not confined to the past, but continue to echo through time, shaping our understanding of the world and our place within it. The lost truths of Greece are out there, waiting to be uncovered by those curious enough to seek them. And perhaps, in finding them, we will unlock new ways of thinking that will shape the future, just as the Greeks did so many centuries ago.